Were we done?
Yes,
You're live.
you're
from,
live.
You're live from Cornfield, Colorado. Beautiful Cornfield, Colorado. I saw they're growing pineapples up there. Did you see it? Yeah. It's totally cool.
1, 2, 3. We're live
from beautiful Colorado, the middle.
Bertha, Colorado.
Bertha, Colorado.
Yes. So we're doing that little project from Panther's Gate Productions, and today I have a special guest, longtime friend, not long enough though, Kisu, and we're just going to dive right into the interview, and you're going to get to know everything you need to know about him through, of course, the glorious talk that he does, because he's fun to listen to. So, Kisu.
Hi, everyone. I'm almost nervous.
Why?
Oh, I don't know, because
But you're such a stage
we're
guy.
live. God, good to see you. It's been a hot minute.
Yes.
Thanks for the beautiful tea.
Thanks for joining for dinner.
You're
Yes.
awesome. Thank you.
Very much. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? I mean, I already know everything.
Well, I don't know what's to tell. I teach martial arts. I've been involved with a couple of popular wide distribution media projects. The Kung Fu Panda TV series, Kung Fu Panda movie.
What did you do with that one?
That was the martial arts consultant for that. And there's another real popular show, Avatar The Last Airbender, which seems to be having a little resurgence of its own. It's the #1 show on Netflix. Watch it. Excuse me. And some other stuff. Was a stuntman in Hollywood for years and years and years. And I've moved here to the quiet of Colorado, where I am quietly teaching martial arts to a small group of people. And through that, I got a chance to meet you and your lovely group. A very skilled martial art practitioner and spiritual teacher. I love you.
I love you too.
And I'm really happy to be here. Not much to tell. I'm living the quiet life right now. I've got a couple of projects that are in the works that could be interesting. Something called Legends of the Sword, which will be an animated action adventure piece about a bunch of children who were forced to go return the ring to Moldor. And life is good. What can I say? I'm happy to not be isolated in my home anymore after 3 months of hiding out with my beautiful friend. And yeah.
Well, since you're in the quiet of Colorado, where are some of the places that you've been, and what's like your top favorite?
Oh my God, I have fallen in love with the countryside. I love going up to Rocky Mountain National Park, exploring Fall River Road and different places up there. Picture Rock, Garden of the Gods, Lookout Mountain. What's that one place? Mount Falcon. Oh my God, I was eating. Look at this. I was a mosquito smorgasbord up there. I was a big hit with the bugs, and yeah, they're hoping I come back.
I bet. So you had mentioned Kung Fu Panda and choreographing some of the martial arts. Can you kind of give our audience a little bit of an understanding of what behind the scenes looks like, what that entails, the workload, the hours, what they might not really be able to understand from the seats?
All projects are different. So Kung Fu Panda was much different, say, than Avatar The Last Airbender, because creatively they didn't know what they were trying to do. And so I gave them a lot of detail and a lot of functional processes. And we were in a meeting with the famous Jeffrey Katzenberg from DreamWorks, who looked at the work we were doing and said, "You're using too much Kung Fu for Kung Fu Panda," which I thought was hilarious. But generally we would have, with that show, we'd have meetings for a reference session where we'd read the script, and then we'd go through and see what sort of action elements that it would call for, and then we would pitch one another on what we thought would be good. And, once again, they didn't know what they wanted. And in the end, they wanted more comedy than authentic martial art.
Okay.
So it was a short-lived process, but I got a little money. I like money. And, you like money too? We should hang out. As opposed to, say, Avatar The Last Airbender, which was it was a once-in-a-lifetime affair where I was the only person on the planet with my job.
Nice.
A martial art coordinator for a cartoon. And that followed a completely different process where we would have a meeting first to read the script and the action elements of the script, and then we would pitch one another on what we thought would be the best sequence for that. And then we'd have a second meeting where they would come back to me and pretend like they had come up with my ideas. And but they were paying me a lot of money, so I would acquiesce to that. And we would talk about specifics of the particular motions for a type of bending. Bending, if you didn't know, was there were 4 elements, and each of the elements were influenced by practitioners of earth, water, air, fire, and eventually metal. And then we would have a third meeting once we decided what sort of action elements we wanted to have, where we would film the action from the specific angle. So throughout the entire series, if there was any action that you liked in the show, I would demonstrate the reference for that. And then also, one of the creators, Brian Konecko, had been my student for a few years, and he would help me with the action. So you'd see a fight between Zuko and Azula, or Aang and another character, and both of us would play those specific parts. So it was really fun and super organic.
Wonderful.
And the rest is history. It's #1 show on Netflix, by the way. If you haven't watched it, go and watch it. Change your life.
Yes, it's definitely a very captivating, emotional, and suspenseful type anime.
Oh yeah, the character growth arcs for each and every character are just out of this world, and there's so much relatable content, and the martial arts sequences are superb.
So I liked both The Last Airbender and Kung Fu Panda, again for different reasons, which now that you've explained the martial arts setup and then the intent behind the shooting actually makes sense. Kung Fu Panda definitely was very comedic,
Yeah.
whereas The Last Airbender was more spiritual and informational. It's like it was telling morality. Whereas Kung Fu Panda had morality, but it was more one bit.
It covered so many social issues in terms of
Which one?
colonialism, imperialism.
Oh yes, the Airbender.
Various types of racism.
Ego.
Ego, and
That's
the
huge.
struggle to overcome ego, and the struggle to see past your own desires for the greater good of humanity, which was oh my God, it's cartoons before that like Tom and Jerry or the Flintstones. You had hit them over the head with a mallet, and suddenly you had a show that would talked about friendship, honor, duty, loyalty, love. It was groundbreaking on so many levels. And then we continued a little bit of that in the Legend of Korra series, which had a lot of interesting twists and turns. A lot of people, for instance, there was a huge gap between the first season and the second season. There was a 2-year gap, which is very uncommon, which drove a bunch of people crazy. And the big secret that no one ever told anyone was that season 2 and 3 were going to be, or supposed to be, and contracted to be done by Miyazaki's company, Studio Ghibli. And they
Checked it.
they had some difficulties getting animation doesn't pay a lot of money in Japan, and and so it's done more for the prestige. And a lot of the local artists, the famous artists who worked for Studio Ghibli, weren't interested in working on a project that wasn't going to be exclusive to Japan.
So you just brought to light something, and I don't know if the audience picked up on it. Japan doesn't get paid a lot for their animation, yet from what I've seen as far as the animation from there compared to here, it seems that they're more passionate about what they do, their characters, the details, and everything else.
Absolutely.
Because, like teachers, if they're underpaid, they're in the profession because they want to be, whereas here it's making a quick buck. Am I to understand that right?
For instance, most of the animation was done in Korea, where literally you're paid pennies per page. And when you do an animation, you have a series of keyframes, and then you have the in-between, what's called tweens, where you draw, from this stance to this, right? And you're paid pennies. And so, since you're being paid such a small amount of money, then you want to do the simplest animation as possible. And so for someone to attempt to do these very complicated sequences of movement was very challenging. And then the directors and the creators, they not only wanted to have these complicated sequences of actions, they wanted to frame it in a particular type of lens, right? So there was a telephoto for a particular one, or there was a wide angle for another one, or there was, it was amazing what they did. All props go to Brian Konechko and Mike DiMartino. Brian in particular is a visionary in terms of artistic talent. And he could draw in a framework that I had never seen before. And I was not interested in being involved with Hollywood anymore. I worked for years for Sabara on Power Rangers, VR Troopers, Masked Rider, Big Bad Beetleborgs. I was the villain on Big Bad Beetleborgs for 62 episodes. And I was tired of the entertainment business. I was done. I was never going to do it again. I was quietly teaching martial arts in my backyard down in the hood in Los Angeles. When this kid came to me and he was just like, "Oh, you don't do this TV show, what you working with?" He didn't talk like that. But I told him I wasn't interested. I said, come to class, do the work, pay your dues, leave me alone. And he showed me his storyboards for the pilot, where Zuko didn't have a scar. I do. They stole my scar. Now, actually, I lit myself on so many levels, physically, mentally, and spiritually, as well as my likeness. The guru, his body was formed after mine.
You basically got invoked into the show.
Yeah. Well, it was very interesting because, can we make this go away? Sorry. I got roped into it because it was really funny. Since I was a child, I was always able to immerse myself in a fantasy world to escape a lot of trauma and weirdness. That, growing up is hard. And when they pitched me on the idea for the show, originally it was just going to be this bending, right? And there were elements, and I said, well, why don't we take and make specific to each bending a particular style of martial art?
Get to that, yeah.
Yeah, and so I took all the martial arts that I was fond of, all the martial arts that I respected, and brought them into the show, and I wasn't necessarily an expert at any of them. I've been trained in the Northern Shaolin style. I've been with the same teacher for about 45 years.
45 years.
Same teacher. I love him. He's my father. He yells at me.
Every good one does.
Yeah, he's super proud of me. He's hilarious. We went to see him at Christmas, and he introduced me as his most famous student, which kind of tickled me because he is a visionary. His name is Kenneth Hui. He teaches in the Los Angeles area. He doesn't take students casually, if you can find him.
So a hidden gem.
Yeah, oh, definitely. All of the old school Kung Fu guys are very low key, and they're really interested in promoting the cultural aspects because it's their cultural gem. Kung Fu for me shaped me and reformed me into the person that you see before you. God, I was so small in terms of bless you, in terms of who I was. Kung Fu allowed me to grow into myself and force me past my ego, past my supposed inadequacies, and eliminated all my inconsistencies. It was my rock in the stream of life. You know, God knows where I would be if I hadn't. And I've grown from it. I'm 61 years old, and I don't look it yet. And still healthy, teaching a small group, practicing every day. It's there's not a lot of air here in Colorado.
It's a lifestyle.
Yeah, it's beyond lifestyle. It's good kung fu, good martial art is like brushing your teeth, right? If you brush your teeth, you have healthy dental hygiene. If you don't, there are consequences, right? So it's the same with your body. You have to practice yourself, right? You have to. You don't have to, but if you push yourself beyond your supposed limitations, you'll discover who you are at your most root essence. And I think if I got anything from this journey, it's that I got a chance to discover who I am. I got a chance to realize the power of filling this vehicle with my spirit, and I got a chance to realize the power of my own mind, which as a young person I had none of that. I was a mess.
Well, the phrase comes to mind, man know thyself. And for more of our spiritual esoteric followers, martial arts is one of the physical processes or methods of alchemy that has been there thousands of years. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't get the essence of what it is because of the last 40 years and the Americanization of it, losing some of the principles. Not that in any way disrespect to America.
It is what it is.
But it is what it is. Yeah. And when we have shows like Kung Fu Panda and The Last Airbender, those who know the knowledge, who have experienced the path, who have been formed by the art, see much more in the animation and get much more rich depth connection than somebody who sees it more for its popularity or its game. So then that begs the question that I would like to ask you is, with Kung Fu Panda, 5 animals, and then you have the 5 elements, and 2 different approaches.
And 7 deadly sins.
We would go there. With Kung Fu Panda, how true, I have my opinions, but I would love to hear yours. How true to the actual animals were the martial arts movements that were choreographed?
Again, they lacked vision in exactly what they wanted. It was such a new affair that they were trying to strike a balance between authenticity and comedy.
So what was the purpose for Kung Fu Panda?
The purpose, I think in the end, was just to make money. But I think there were a series of, it was a morality tale. So there's a series of lessons that were involved.
What were the 2 top ones you think that people should get from Kung Fu Panda?
I think self-realization was a big ticket in there. It's know yourself, know your enemy, and 1,000 battles you'll never be defeated. I also think that, like the golden belt buckle or whatever the thing was that they were trying to get in the end, taught you that, how can I put it? That martial arts in the end is really just a vehicle for spiritual growth. That people who become top-level martial artists, they become healers, they become spiritualists, they become spiritual warriors. They make the world a better place just through their sheer presence.
Because they don't neglect the physical element or the real concept of impact, connection, and the strength and fragility of the actual body. One of the major things that I actually got out of Kung Fu Panda, and it might be a personal tell about me, but similar, and I think this speaks true to most martial artists, is the underdog effect. It's what draws us to the martial arts. And Panda definitely was drawn to the martial arts.
Strong, yes.
because he seemed like the underdog in the community. He was the one that had conflict and trials and tribulations, and that was his saving grace that made him realize he was stronger than he ever was.
An interesting character growth arc for that was he knew who he was from the beginning. He was just a big fat panda that liked to eat and, you know, was helping out his dad's shop. And his growth arc from there, from being comfortable with who he was becoming extraordinary in who he was. In the end, he was the same guy, but he had accumulated these skills. They didn't illustrate that very well.
So
nonetheless, it was really fun.
The incidental, true moral character arc should be that of the audience and their transformation if it does its job correctly. So then we get to the Airbender, that which actually has done that and proven it well. How would you say it does that, and how does the 5 elements really?
Oh my God, there's so many layers to what occurred in that show. And looking at it again recently, rewatching it years later without my ego and my insecurities involved in watching that, I could really see the story they were telling. You look at Prince Zuko, who was so angsty and was so caught up in thinking that his honor was something separate from himself.
Pride.
Yeah. And overcoming that and deciding that, I'm getting goosebumps with this, deciding that it was more important to make the world a better place than it was to reach for some sort of personal gain. His pursuit of the Avatar was really just about himself and his relationship with his father. And in the end, he realized he would never have a relationship with his father because his father was about himself. He wasn't about the land. He wasn't about the people. It was about, owning everything. There's a lot of that going on. Stop it.
Okay, but he represented fire. Now, fire is one of my favorite elements. Being an alchemist, it's like the constant burn, the constant state of transformation, removing the impurities, and that whole concept that who was the uncle or the
Uncle Iroh was the balancing
Uncle
force.
Iroh, he was the balancing force that
he had been through the fire. He had seen everything. He had lost everything.
He understood the destruction and its counterpart. Could you go into fire?
And he loved tea. Fire?
Yes, the element of fire. We saw one person of fire go through this transformation, but Iroh, he was almost consistent throughout, but he also represented fire, like a calm flame.
When it's under control, it's a tool. The moment it gets loose, it's all consuming. And that was the lesson with the Fire Nation, was that without the balancing force of the Avatar, it could rein everything in, that fire got out of control and it went from heating up the teapot to burning down the house and then the neighborhood and then the land. And then the world was his goal. And how could he not do that? Because without someone to put him in check, that was his nature to consume everything. At the day of, what was the thing called? Sozin's Comet. He was going to burn everything down and then recreate everything in the image of the Phoenix King. And that is so much ego, right? All of the elements balance themselves in the Asian culture. Fire, water, earth, air, metal operate when they're cooperative and when they're in harmony, they operate in a cycle of creation. Fire creates earth.
There's a control cycle, a destruction cycle, or retardation cycle.
So the cycle of promotion goes like this. The cycle of destruction goes like this. It's a 5-pointed star.
And then reverse control.
And reverse control, exactly. Yeah. It's earth holds water, but water washes away earth. It's way too heavy for me. I got a little brain, but I'm very sincere about what I'm attempting to do, which is just find balance in this world.
I think we're all the fire. So the two characters were basically showing the dichotomy of both throughout the entire show. How would you say the element of water played out in the Airbender?
Water is the neutralizing force for fire, right? So it's water boils under the effect of fire. Fire is extinguished, right? The moment in the body, for instance, I believe in Chinese they call it kan and li. is those two forces balance themselves. If there's too much fire, you heat up, you have a fever, and you die.
You dry out.
If there's too much water, then you get pneumonia, and it extinguishes your fire, and you die. Anytime that you fall out of balance in this life, you die. It's the same with your mental state. Mental health is all a balancing act. If you go too far in any extreme in terms of your inner landscape, you're called names. I won't say any of those names, but it's a balancing act, and I think that spiritual practices, the martial arts, shamanistic practices, all lead the practitioner toward a state of balance and harmony, right? Balance and harmony in the self, balance and harmony in the physical landscape, balance and harmony in the spiritual landscape.
Did you notice with the brother and the sister, Water, her personality, who she ended up attracted to, his personality, who he ended up attracted to?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Could you go into that?
Ooh, the convolutions of the relationships in that show are way deeper than me. And let me say that show was not the result of one person's work. That show was a series of extraordinary interconnections. The writers were an amazing balancing force of the head writer, Aaron, I always mispronounce his name, and his wife were kind of a counterbalancing force. They wrote and brought some of the best essences to it. And then...
and Aaron was your student?
No, Brian Konesko was my student. Brian wrote, as well as Mike DiMartino. They all wrote episodes, but everything was formed in a writer's room. So that there were a series of different minds that were focusing and creating the essence that went into that show. It's extraordinary. There were, like, literally every episode cost $1 million. Think about that. Every episode had hundreds of people working in concert to bring that together. And there was so much effort toward authenticity. I don't think it could ever be created. They're talking about doing an animated series. It's still, people are curious about it and asking about it. It's in the very early developmental stages. I can't speak for it. I'm not involved in that. I potentially could end up working with them. But I've got other projects that I'm attempting to pursue. So we'll see if time and opportunity coincide for that to happen. But I'm very confident that whatever happens next won't be the mistake that was The Last Airbender movie. M. Night Shyamalan, who's a very talented individual, had some very strong ideas that weren't in harmony with the original concept. I'm being nice, M. Night.
Yes, I actually like some of his viewpoints. They have their time and place, like the time and place of opportunity. So the other elements, if you could just touch briefly upon them and how you see them energetically, because a spiritual warrior has to understand all of the elements, all of the influences, and getting a little bit of an idea of how they work in harmony with each other, how they flow in and out, how they create, how they destroy, and balance, I think is important. And they're going to see this as they watch The Last Airbender. But if you could give them just a little bit of a seed planted for them to know what to look for, to get their minds focused in some of the stuff they might miss if they're not a martial artist.
There's so many things in that show that, and depending on your perspective, everyone's going to look at it differently. One of the things that we explored was defending oneself passively. There's the episode where the fellow who's traveling, he's got a sword on his back, he's attacked by a platypus bear. And he could easily have stabbed the thing to death, but instead he avoided it through the use of the traditional Chinese Kung Fu footwork, which I thought was brilliant. And then we repeated that theme in the episode, I think it was the headband, where they danced in the cave, and Aang was being bullied by the the popular kid at school. You're one of those popular kids I've heard about. And again, he could have easily trounced this kid, but he avoided him and made him look like a fool by neutralizing his aggression by being not only completely passive, but not being present.
So kind of like the dichotomy between Tai Chi and Krav Maga.
Krav is a very interesting discipline.
Isn't it?
It's it was formed as a military principle. I think some of our Israeli brothers put some energy into that. I have various opinions about the different styles of martial arts. I believe any martial art has to deal with the concepts of harmony. In my opinion, some Krav practitioners are too aggressive, and your aggression can always be turned against you. I was taught in the martial art that you should never apply any more than 70% of your power, that you need at least 30% in reserve so that you don't overextend yourself, so that your energy is not used against you. Did I answer your question?
Yes. Yes, more than probably what I would have thought that I could have pulled from you, because I have that tendency, delightfully so. I respect all the arts, and most people that know me, I believe more in interdisciplinary than I do mixed martial arts. And not so much that one's better than the other, but more they serve different purposes. Like Krav Maga, I like it. It's quick, it's explosive, it's close quarter.
Easy to learn.
It's effective, but it's great for police officers, agents, people who see anyone and everyone as a potential threat.
Yeah.
But when you're civilian, when you're thinking about, oh, this could be a potential friend, they're just worried and full of anxiety. They don't mean to threaten me. Then having Tai Chi and that sense of peace, inner harmony, where you're not rattled by something, and kind of that passive defensiveness.
Tai Chi is unique. It's one of the few martial arts that always yields before it strikes. A lot of people don't really understand Tai Chi. Tai Chi is 13 throws with strikes, right? There's a little mixed bag in there. It always yields before it strikes. There are many schools of it, and of course there are many practitioners. I see a big degradation in the quality of martial arts today, mainly because people are trying to make money with it. And so there are many people who haven't been trained that well who have decided to monetize it. And that has hurt the martial arts at large. I get it. People want to make a living. People want to surround themselves with a group of students who support them financially.
But the propaganda, the on-air, the fame, the glory, the ego, the trophies.
The ego. Yeah. You got it. You don't have to, but in my opinion, to be successful, you've got to park your ego to the side. It's the traditional Chinese martial arts, for instance, and there are various levels of that as well. But the way I learned it was that there was a series of footworks, and those footworks created a base. It's like building a house, right? If you build a house in the clouds, you don't have a good foundation. So you build a strong foundation, and then you build like a pyramid on top of that. And so it's the basic supports the advanced technique. A lot of people have rushed to create these aggressive martial arts structures. I respect a lot of MMA fighters and a lot of people that have moved to that UFC competition. And it's really good. It's easy to learn. But if you, in my opinion, if you did the tradition, if you practice stances for 20 years, as opposed to just, rushing in and being able to take somebody down, with a good stance, I have a good stance. You'll have trouble taking me down, right? I'm not saying that I'm invincible, but I've got a really good foundation in terms of my base. And so you're going to have to deal with that if you get me off my feet. And if you don't understand those principles, I might take advantage of you.
Well, any good martial artist knows their strengths and their weaknesses.
Yes.
And that being said, so we have COVID, we have society, the world as we know it, 2020 has changed.
Upside down.
From a martial artist perspective, from a warrior perspective, from a spiritualist, just a person who sees transformation, We talk about the foundation, we talk about the feet, and I see a lot of misstepping going on. Think, how would we explain to people what we as martial artists, those who don't avoid necessarily conflict, but understand it, engage it, diffuse it, de-escalate it, so on and so forth. What do you as a martial artist see happening in the world that is in favor and not in favor of the people who are experiencing it, that have never dealt with conflict like this?
There's a lot of factors at play, the least of which is the world operates in cycles, right? The Chinese have broken it down into there's a different animal essence for every year. And strangely enough, this is a rat year. And think about it, what happened 12 years ago in the rat year? 2008 was the total financial collapse of this country. And so I've started to recognize these. There are some years that are better for different things. The rat...
Prideful.
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on there, but there's a lesson here for us. And this is, in my opinion, there's no growth without conflict. There's no growth without tension.
Right.
Right? And so this is a beautiful teaching moment. It's a beautiful opportunity for all of us to learn through hardship. Everything's becoming polarized right now. Everyone's political beliefs, you know, are really polarized.
Tense.
And there are some charismatic people that are in positions of power that are more interested, it's like the Fire Nation, they're more interested in their personal gain. I'm not naming any names, I love everyone. They're more interested in their personal gain than they are of the world at large. And I think
the empire.
I feel that we're at a tipping point. We're at a point in time, and I don't know anything, but we're at a point in time where we're in a renaissance. It's an age of Aquarius where people are really taking a look at things and going, I'm not sure if I agree with that, right? I'm not sure if I like that. That's wrong. And there's a huge movement now calling people out. The execution of that hasn't necessarily been harmonious. So I don't have any answers. I just know that we're in the middle of a cycle. And I think it's important to understand that everything is temporary. That this is a cycle. It's you know, I mean,
nature.
There's a plague going. There's a you know, crazy ass dynamic political things that are happening. There are crazy dynamic. Did I say it better?
Yes, you did. I smiled.
There are crazy. We're in a very, very dynamic forces at play right now, and so I don't really have an answer for you.
I think you answered it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're dealing with cycle. We can look at the rat, its characters, its qualities. You said Fire Nation, and I've said it before many times. I think the world right now is calcinating. It's burning away, exposing the impurities, and going through its true first stage of transformation to get to where it needs through this next 12 years or this cycle.
Yeah.
And the world's definitely hit it at a major point. And I don't think it's just 12 years, but it's going through it 12 times, which magic number 1.4. Yes.
60, 12 times 5 and so you have, for every animal element, there's 12 animals. Then you have 5 elements, and so there's one cycle of 12 in water. There's one cycle of 12, and so on and so forth. And so there are poetic descriptions and dynamics that are at play. Once you get to be 60 years old, you've actually seen the cycle of 12, and then you're starting over from birth at your 60th birthday. And but the world is interesting now. I've never seen it like this. I've seen different types of social upheavals. I was alive for when Kennedy was killed. I watched the social upheaval. Well, when Kennedy died, when I was a child, people were crying in the street. And then when Martin Luther King died, the cities went up in flame. People lost their mind. They were like, I'm sick of this. And then there was the Civil Rights Act Band-Aid. And then, you know, things kind of went back to normal. Then there was another huge affront, and then society, you know, went crazy again. And so there's a few forces at play. One is the military-industrial complex. narcotics. There is a profit structure surrounding the sale of weapons, and that is ever growing. There's constant struggle to have a technological superiority, and so that feeds on itself. Like you look at the militarization of police. The reason that these police are getting tanks and machine guns and all this stuff is because there's a market out there that's supplying it to a world that's saturated with it, right? So, you know, we sell our own weapons to other countries, and we already have defeats. For instance, in Iraq, the United States sold Iraq all this artillery and different tanks and whatnot, but they didn't bother telling them that the artillery had electronic fuses that could be defeated by a particular radio frequency. And so, you know, with the long view, the United States knew that they were going to have conflict there and go in and take that oil.
And we both served in the military. I served Army in your
Air
time,
Force.
and you've seen a lot. So it's not like you're just speaking basic political jargon. You've been there, you've been through it, you've seen. I've been there, been through it, I've seen. Probably not as much, not as in depth. But you talk about, you know, 60 and 12, and for those who follow numbers and more the esoteric knowledge, 12 is like a heavy, intense number that just looking, you can find them everywhere. And I think maybe looking at the elements, maybe even watching The Last Airbender, having some fun on the pursuit. If people are looking to enhance their spirituality, gain some more knowledge, shift their perceptions, maybe open up their mind a little bit more, that it would be a good way to start, especially if they have to socially isolate or come
It's
to
time to look within.
Definitely.
It's time to check yourself out. It's time to watch the breath. It's time to have deep introspection. It's time to really, really check yourself out. This is an opportunity. You're locked up in your home. Don't sit there being bored. Don't sit there trying to distract yourself. Sit down and check yourself out. Check out your inner landscape. Meditation is one way. Spiritual studies are another way. Religion is another way. Magic is another way. You know,
It's interesting. There's a lot of people that aren't quite aware, and maybe they can become aware. They think the conflict or what they're seeing is themselves, where they feel like they're losing their mind. I've actually counseled a few people that have had an existential crisis, and the one thing they must remember is there has been a complacency. And it's because we're the ones that are going through this change while the world seems kind of constant. Well, guess what? Our world just got shook up. So what we're seeing is the external public realm up in an upheaval. And we can either be in an upheaval with it, or we can be the calm center. And I think if people start to realize that maybe it isn't them, but it's the world, they can transact and change the world through changing thyself.
You make the world better one person at a time. If I make a commitment to be a better person, if I make a commitment not to spread hate, if I make a commitment to touch the lives of everyone in my sphere in a positive manner, and then each one of those people I touch can do that. And it has an exponential growth. Just like fear. Fear has an exponential growth. It's like, oh, they're coming to burn down my town, right? Oh, there's fear, and it's infectious. Love is equally infectious. You know, spread love. It's look at the person next to you. Give a little compassion. Pay it forward.
Definitely.
You know, buy somebody coffee.
So we restate, man, know thyself. And it's funny we talk about fire, because there is an old ancient of the mystery schools, the philosophy of fire. And I think if people start reading, start doing the word, if they haven't before, that's another avenue for enlightenment. So I want to thank you, Kisu, for being present. Would you like to tell our audience all the different ways they can get to know you, reach out, where you might be teaching martial arts?
I teach a small class in Lafayette, Colorado. I don't take casual students. It's hard, serious, no-nonsense training. It's hard work. I've got a page where I've featured the cream of, in my opinion, the cream of martial arts at Sifu Kisu of the Harmonious Fist on Facebook, and Lokhopkyun on Instagram, Lokhopkyun. where I'm attempting to make a difference by just promoting positivity and promoting martial virtue and the character growth that comes from the hard work in the martial arts. I'm hoping that if people in your audience, she has a wealth of knowledge in terms of the growth of the spirit and self-work and shadow work and so many things. Root work, thank you. And so many things that I don't have the words for. Look beyond yourself. Help someone else. Smile. Give love. Live love. Be sweet. Don't be an asshole.
You did it again.
Did I say it again?
You did it again. So, thank you.
I love everybody.
If you guys look below, feel free to comment, ask questions. Any of us will be able to get back. He's going to put down the links below. Same thing with us. Obviously you're seeing the page, so you know about ours. You can check out the website, but we'll leave everything down below for you guys. Again, thank you. Thank you for supporting. And we love Berthoud, we love Colorado, and we love the rest of the world. So thank you.
Thanks for having me here. I was so excited. I missed you so much.
We definitely have to go and do more. I don't know with regards to COVID how long it's lasting, but we gotta adapt because seeing you as a stranger doesn't do well.